This is Kayla Schacht, and this is my language analysis case study presentation. In this presentation, you will hear about my student. You will see his interview transcription and analysis. You will see some of his written samples and analysis. I will talk about the similarities and differences between his written and oral work and an action plan. So here's a little bit about my student. He is a 4th grade boy, 9 years old, in PS 60 in Staten Island, New York. He is in a family of 4 that consists of his mom, his dad, and an older sister. He speaks Spanish and English. He came to America from Mexico when he was in 1st grade, so he's been here for about 3 to 4 years. He's in a general education classroom, but this class has more of the ELS students in this grade level. His parents speak Spanish at home with very little English spoken. Him and his sister speak English at home unless they are talking to their parents. His parents and sister help him with homework and his schoolwork as much as they can, and his homework is always done. He is considered a friendly and determined student by his classmates and his teachers. He is a reading level H, which is below grade level. He was tested for a level I, but it was too challenging for him in comprehension. He can read, but he has a hard time comprehending, but writing is his biggest struggle. He was scored expanding on his latest test. In his ESL program, he has been with the same students that travel together each year, so he's created a really good bond with him and his teachers. His interests include science, specifically weather, soccer, and he loves to talk about his family, especially his sister. So here were some of the questions asked in the interview with my student. I highlighted some few main points that I would like to talk about. So when I asked him, "Do you have any siblings?" he replied, "I have sister." "What do you and your sister do at home?" "We watch TV. I play outside sometime. We play with the soccer ball when we go outside. We playing the games on the phone too." "Do you like school? Please explain why you do or don't like school." "I like school. I like to learning and when I see my friends and teachers. I like when we do art or gym." As we continued on in the interview, he expressed that he likes science and math is very easy to him, especially when he uses manipulatives like blocks. He said that I like read about weather when I asked what kind of books he likes to read, and he explained that he picked the weather science book. When I asked about what languages he speaks inside and outside of school, he expressed that he speaks English, but at home he speaks Spanish to his parents, and his parents speak Spanish to him. He also said that when his family calls on the phone, he speaks Spanish to them on the phone, but he speaks English to his sister, and he only really speaks English in school. So my analysis of this is that he has very simple vocabulary and sentence structure. For example, most of his sentences were stated, "I like," and his sentences really didn't have any complex or 4th grade level vocabulary. He thinks shortly before he creates sentences, but he doesn't really hesitate or delay that much, and you can kind of tell that he wants to explain more, but maybe it was because he was a little shyer with me in the interview. He confuses the tense of words. For example, he said "we playing the games" instead of "we play" or "we like to play." And he said "I like to learning" instead of "I like learning" or "I like to learn." In connection to the SLA theory, I connected it to Krashen's acquisition learning hypothesis, which Krashen focuses on saying that completing the task regardless of errors. So my student really wanted to make sure I understood what he was saying in his meaning rather than focusing on errors as he was speaking to me. This hypothesis focuses on natural communication, which I felt that we were doing during this interview. According to the natural order hypothesis, also by Krashen, grammatical structures follow this natural predictable order, which is applied to both language acquisitions, but it's different between the two languages. Speakers are less concerned with the structure of their statement than the act of communicating meaning. This hypothesis that children acquire their first language, acquire linguistic form, rules, and items in a similar order. So for his oral rubric, I considered him transitioning. I bolded some of the parts that I felt were aimed towards him. So there were 2 that were expanding, but in results, he was transitioning. He does participate in class discussions that contribute and answer questions to a lesson, but he does not initiate, lead, or engage his classmates in these discussions. He does state when he has questions or needs support, and he participates in whole class discussion in listening and with expression. Here is a work sample done by my student. He was to write about something he was reading. In his case, it was about hurricanes and tornadoes. I highlighted some of the errors, but they are similar in pattern. He uses capital letters in places he shouldn't. For example, he highlighted the F in if or the T in to. He also makes some frequent spelling errors, but they are close to the word or the sound of the word. For example, he spells now, but he really meant no. You know. Or the word come. He spells C-O-M instead of C-O-M-E. In his work, he also repeats himself. He explains twice that you need to look at the sky to see hurricanes and tornadoes. He also creates unclear sentences. He uses one period at the end of each response instead of punctuation throughout. He only brings forth about 2 ideas instead of detailed thoughts he has on this topic. He also writes really small and sometimes off the line, which can be harder to read. Here is another written work sample done by my student with the same errors and patterns. He uses incorrect capitalization, spelling errors, punctuation, and unclear words and sentences. For example, in the sentence, he says, they can protect, and he spells protect, P-R-O-T-E-K, you of the bat people. He writes of instead of from. He spells bad, B-A-T with a capital B, and people he spells incorrect. These errors and patterns are consistent throughout his writing. So my analysis of his written work was that his spelling errors were common, but they were similar to the word spelling or the sound of the word. His sentences were simplistic for his grade level. He uses capital letters in places where they don't belong. He did not use punctuation unless it was the end of the sentence of the entire answer. Some of his ending or tense of words were challenging. We can understand what he is writing, but some words are out of place or he is not including words that he should. He repeats words or sentences, which makes his answer unclear and run on. In relation to SLA theories, Krashen's natural order hypothesis, which discussed before, which follows the natural predictable order, which is applied to both of the language acquisitions. Another theory is Chomsky's universal grammar, which is considered to contain all the grammatical information needed to combine into categories, into phrases. For example, like nouns and verbs combined into phrases. The child's task is to just learn the words of their language. The student uses this knowledge of nouns and verbs to create meaningful phrases, which my student did in his writing. I also mentioned Skinner's behavioralist theory, which is that learners learn from repeated practice and positive rewards. So in my observations, I have noticed that during writing, when the teacher uses positive reinforcements and rewards, the student benefits and his performance increases. He will be able to repeat and practice and be rewarded for things that he is doing correct. For his written rubric, I considered him emerging. I bolded some of the points that matched up with his written work samples. I did highlight some of the entering beginner because he only hinted at the topic development instead of using a series of related ideas or details. He does use simple sentences, and his spelling is phonetic, and he uses phrases in simple sentences. So for this, he is emerging, unlike his oral, which was transitioning. So some of the similarities and differences between his oral and written work were that his similarities were kind of the same grammatical patterns and errors, like endings of words and tense. He is very dedicated to complete his tasks, so he has no problem doing the assignments or answering questions, but they are very short and simplistic with no 4th grade vocabulary. Some of the differences were that he can speak very confidently, unlike writing confidently. His writing is challenging since his thoughts cannot be fully written. When he is speaking, his thoughts are developed and clear. So when answering questions, even if he makes mistakes, you know what he is saying and what his point is, unlike in his writing. His spelling sometimes makes his answer unclear. In his writing, he tends to run on and repeat. He will repeat words and sentences, unlike in his speaking, he will not repeat or go back on his words. My analysis of the similarities and differences in hypothesis was that why can he further discuss his thoughts when speaking versus writing, but his speaking is still simplistic? He is more confident in his speaking abilities since he is not getting challenged by spelling and sentence structure. His thoughts are just coming out into the sentences that he is thinking of rather than thinking about spelling errors or sentence structure. He is more confident and is quicker to put his thoughts into speaking words than written words. He can further discuss his thoughts orally even if his vocabulary is still simplistic. When he is speaking, he is just speaking his mind rather than thinking about all the writing rules and things he has to follow. The action plan for my student would be one-on-one support or smaller group conferences. He does this in class already, but I think I would emphasize the social interaction. Pairing him with higher ESL students would also increase his social interaction and pair him with students that are related to him. I would also use visuals and checklists. Drawing a picture before he writes will help him jot his ideas down and he can really focus on the details he wants to write. Having him check off on a checklist can keep his thoughts organized and he can understand what exactly he has to do. I would also discuss harder vocabulary beforehand so he can understand it when he comes across it in his reading. Defining and talking about challenging vocabulary will increase his chances of using it in his speaking and his writing if he knows and comprehends the word. Repeating and practicing any errors or strengths that he has so he can improve and make less mistakes. Correcting him when he makes errors so he can decrease these errors in the future. These will support his output in his speaking and writing. Thank you for watching my presentation, and here are my references.